Imagine when you leave a job, your employer gives you $83,000 for all the sick time you never took, or 30 grand for unused vacation time. Sound crazy? Well, it happens at the state capitol, and you're paying for it. A standing ovation on the floor of the Senate recently for Donna Malpezzi, who retired as general counsel for the Republican caucus. Senators showed genuine affection for their longtime employee.
I didn't really look at her as our lawyer. As a member of the Senate Republican caucus, and I mean this as the highest compliment, I looked at her as our team mom.
They even spoke of her frugal ways.
Anything that cost money, Donna would be instinctively suspicious of. This has a fiscal impact. How much does this cost?
But a standing O is not all Donna got for her service, and critics say it was not a frugal deal. ABC 27 has learned Malpezzi got a severance of nearly $90,000, unused sick time of nearly $83,000, and unused vacation pay of nearly $30,000. A goodbye worth more than 200 grand.
That's absolutely absurd. I mean, it's completely ridiculous to give a public employee that kind of buyout. It's unfortunately something that we've come to expect.
Leo Neppers with the Conservative Citizens Alliance of Pennsylvania, he questions Senate policy that allows employees to rack up sick and leave time and get a check on their way out the door.
Sick pay and vacation time is there to be used while you're an employee. Once again, the party that's supposed to be fiscally responsible really making an irresponsible decision.
This is wrong. This is not what we should be doing as we lead Pennsylvania off the brink of financial collapse.
Fiscal watchdogs also wonder if anyone in the legislature is so reward-worthy.
What have we accomplished? We have an over $2 billion structural deficit. We're floating in pension debt that's going to drown the next generation. And these guys are handing out financial frisbees like it's the 4th of July.
Senate Republicans were on retreat and unavailable to comment for this story. But in last week's tribute, Senator Joe Scarnati, who likely signed off on Malpezzi's deal, said this.
Donna Malpezzi is the example of working hard, putting in many long hours, sacrificing herself, her health, her family, for the taxpayers.
Now that 202 grand has already been paid out. That does not include a six-figure pension, which Malpezzi will have for the rest of her life. It's an amazing success story, though, of a local girl makes good. Some at the Capitol are saying there needs to be tighter control on the payment of unused sick and vacation time to retiring employees. Bosses shrug and say it's policy, but others say change it.
Margaret Thatcher once said, "The problem with liberalism is eventually you run out of other people's money." Now, we've run out of other people's money.
Joe Scarnati is the most powerful man in the Senate. He recently approved a payout to a longtime retiring employee. $90,000 severance, 83 grand in unused sick time, 30 grand in unused vacation time. 202,000 of other people's money. He insists the accrued sick and vacation is policy, and the Senate's is not the most generous in the building.
I don't know if you've looked at what some of the other agencies do here, what the House does, what the governor's office does. Well, let me tell you, Dennis, there's some egregious things going on.
Egregious is one word. Gettysburg State Rep Dan Mal has another.
It's obscene. That is obscene.
Mal, who's also a businessman, said he's most offended at employees turning unused sick time into huge goodbye checks.
To tell us that we owe you sick days because you didn't get sick is ridiculous. They were there as an insurance policy for you, not something for you to cash in on.
Scarnati's family used to own a bar. He says he never wrote a big check for unused sick time. Neither is Senator Camara Bartolotta, who owns Duke of Oil of Mon Valley. She questions that policy.
You really need to be more in line with the way that the taxpayers are living and the way that businesses are being conducted in Pennsylvania. If you're going to be their leaders and set an example, you need to follow their lead.
Mal intends to lead. After seeing our story, he said he'll recommend changes to House Republican policy on the cashing of unused sick time.
It rattles my chain quite a bit. Obviously, that's something, now that this has been brought to light, something we got to look into.
And we're continuing to follow up on the story. We are awaiting answers to several right-to-know requests.
Now, does your employer let you accumulate unused sick and vacation days for years and years and then write you a big fat check when you decide to leave? Didn't think so.
But a little digging by ABC 27 found that the state is a pretty generous employer when it comes to departing workers. And while it looks for every penny to cobble together a budget, millions and millions of dollars are literally walking out the door. Page after page, payout after payout. An ABC 27 right to know request found that in the past 2 years alone, the House and Senate have doled out well over $3 million each in unused sick and unused vacation pay to departing employees. 20 walked out the door with more than 30 grand, 11 got more than 40,000, and 9 topped 50 grand. A dozen got $60,000 or more. Watchdogs are barking.
You shouldn't be able to use sick days as a financial investment vehicle. It shouldn't be a golden parachute. You know, we've reached the point of no return.
But the payouts are policy and legal, and there's bipartisan participation. Randy Albright left the Senate Democrats to become Governor Wolf's budget secretary. He said he used just 2 sick days in 29 years, and though he hasn't technically left the building, Albright was rewarded with more than $115,000 in unused sick and vacation when he left the Senate.
I do think it's important to, sit here and speak to you directly. I'm not going to hide from what the facts are and the compensation that I did receive.
Albright wouldn't talk about the appropriateness of the payout policy, but the guy whose job it is to balance the state's books insists that if you want good employees, you have to offer them a good deal.
The compensation levels need to be appropriate to attract that caliber staff.
The Senate's former chief clerk, Russ Faber, got a going away of more than $104,000. The chair of the PUC, Gladys Brown, left Senate Democrats with nearly $79,000. And Christian Callahan, chief of staff to House Majority Leader Mike Turzai, left for a lobbying job with 62 grand in unused sick and vacation. The fiscal watchdogs are also barking.
I think this is why people that aren't in government, or at least in politics, get frustrated with the system, because
Eugene DePasquale is a former lawmaker and the state's auditor general.
Clearly there's no cap on it, there's no control on it, and very few, if any, people in the private sector have anything remotely close to that. And so when you're especially dealing with these tough budget times that the state is facing, reforms have to be put in place to tackle this.
Policy here needs to change too.
Current lawmakers also want reforms.
It rattles my chain quite a bit. Obviously, that's something, now that this has been brought to light, something we got to look into.
The Senate bosses don't just look at the legislature. The problem is Commonwealth-wide.
Well, let me tell you, Dennis, there's some egregious things going on even outside of that.
Indeed, a longtime worker under the governor's jurisdiction recently boasted on Facebook about accumulating sick days years ago when he made $10 an hour and cashing them out at his current $55 an hour. Again, it's policy. And what exactly is the incentive for the policy protectors to change it before it's their turn to cash out?
At the Capitol, the most important term is OPM, other people's money. And when you're spending other people's money, you tend to be much more generous than you would if it were your own money.
And again, we should point out, these are not pensions we're talking about. These are unused sick and vacation. They get pensions on top of that. We should also note that in 2010, much to the chagrin of many employees I've talked to, House Democrats did put caps on how many sick and vacation days their workers could accrue and then cash out.